my dears. Before we begin, if you love stories of secrets hidden in plain sight, please like and subscribe. It truly matters. I never imagined that a child's simple glance could unravel the life I had believed was safe and sacred. It began with Kayla, the neighbor's little girl, watching my husband in a way that sent shivers down my spine. Her eyes held something deeper than curiosity and understanding, a quiet reverence, as if she knew things about him I had never seen. I tried to dismiss the feeling, telling myself children imagine stories, but her gaze lingered, heavy and unsettling, planting a seed of fear. Something in that look whispered a truth I wasn't ready to face, a hidden life threaded through the everyday smiles I thought I knew so well. Then came her words, sweet, casual, yet sharper than any dagger. "He told me that story himself," Kayla said, recounting private details of my husband's life, moments he had never shared with me. My chest tightened, throat dry. How could she know these things? I forced a polite smile, hands trembling beneath the surface. But inside, doubt bloomed, wild and insistent. Every sentence she spoke was a breadcrumb leading me into shadows I wasn't prepared to explore. Fear and curiosity tangled together, urging me forward, yet I froze. Who was she really? And how long had she carried this knowledge, this invisible connection, while I remained oblivious in the home I thought was mine alone? The days that followed were heavy, each one stretching like fragile glass, ready to shatter under the weight of my suspicion. I began noticing details I had once overlooked. He left the house at odd hours. His phone calls whispered and hurried, and he returned with faint traces of perfumes I didn't recognize. Kayla's knowing smile haunted me, a shadow that clung to every quiet moment. Memories I had trusted suddenly felt like illusions. Late-night walks he described casually, laughter that now seemed secretive, glances once comforting, now tinged with concealment. A hidden life existed parallel to mine, invisible yet tangible, just beyond my reach. Anxiety gnawed at me, and a cold ache settled in my chest as I realized that everything I had believed about him, about us, might have been only a fraction of the truth, a carefully masked life I was never meant to see. That evening, fear and curiosity tangled into a sharp, urgent pulse in my chest. I followed him under the veil of night, shadows stretching across the quiet streets, each step echoing my racing heartbeat. Every streetlight felt like an eye watching, every rustle of leaves a warning I couldn't ignore. He stopped at a house I had never noticed before, just a few blocks from ours, and my stomach twisted. There she was, smiling, waiting, familiar yet unknown. The sight hit me like ice water. The laughter they shared, the comfort in their glances, the ease of their reunion. It was a world I had never imagined existed. My knees weakened, my breath caught, and the illusion I had clung to for years shattered. All the smiles, all the I love yous I believed were ours alone, suddenly felt borrowed, fragile, meaningless in the face of this secret life. I returned home that night feeling hollow, each step heavier than the last, my chest tight as if the air itself had turned to stone. Kayla's innocent face, which had once seemed harmless, now haunted every corner of my thoughts. her words echoing like urgent warnings, disguised as childlike play. How long had this hidden world existed, running parallel to mine, quietly breathing beneath the surface of our life together? Every laugh, every whispered, "I love you," every tender glance I had shared with him now felt like carefully placed pieces of a puzzle I was never meant to solve. Sorrow, fear, and anger collided violently inside me, threatening to consume all rational thought. One truth crystallized painfully clear. I had only glimpsed a fragment of the man I married, and the rest, hidden, intimate, devastating, was closer and far more dangerous than I could ever have imagined. The night after I returned home, sleep abandoned me completely. My mind kept replaying Kayla's knowing gaze, her words, the way my husband had smiled without a hint of guilt. I began noticing things I had never paid attention to, the subtle hesitation in his answers, the faint perfume I couldn't identify clinging to his clothes, the hurried tone in his whispers when a message lit up his phone. Kayla's face floated in my thoughts constantly, her eyes carrying secrets that made my skin crawl. I realized I couldn't confront him without proof, something undeniable. Fear gnawed at my stomach, but beneath it, determination flickered. Each shadow in our home felt like it held a hidden truth, each creak in the floorboard a warning that I wasn't alone in the life I thought we shared. Morning came, but with it, no relief, only the hollow weight of uncertainty pressing against me. I moved through the house like a ghost, performing everyday tasks while my mind traced every possible secret, every hidden path in my husband's life. His laughter, once warm and reassuring, now struck me with unease. I watched him closely, noting the small habits, the glances that lingered too long, the subtle changes in tone that hinted at things he refused to reveal. And Kayla, that child's words echoed constantly, like riddles I was too afraid to solve. It terrified me that she might know him better than I did, that she had seen pieces of his heart, his life, his deceit, that I had never been allowed to touch. The house felt smaller, heavier, each room a chamber of secrets I was only beginning to uncover. A week passed in a haze of quiet torment, each day stretching longer than the last, as I balanced observation with the need to act normal. I began leaving subtle traces, small tests to see if he would slip or react differently. And every movement of his was measured against what I now suspected. Kayla, meanwhile, seemed bolder, her casual remarks cutting through the illusion I had clung to. "He told me he couldn't tell you this," she said one afternoon with a shrug, as if the burden of his secrets was nothing to her. My hands shook, heart pounding, as I realized the depth of her awareness. This child, so small, had glimpsed corners of his world I had never suspected. The fear inside me deepened. The life I thought was ours alone was unraveling, and I was powerless to stop it. I began documenting everything, his comings and goings, the subtle changes in his tone, the whispers on the phone, the scents I couldn't place. My notebook became both a sanctuary and a prison, filled with evidence I couldn't yet confront. Kayla's seemingly innocent observations had transformed into a terrifying lens through which the truth was revealed. I questioned whether she was simply perceptive or if she intentionally watched, knowing exactly what she was uncovering. The thought that my husband's double life was so carefully orchestrated, yet casually exposed through a child's words, made my stomach churn. How long had this gone on, unnoticed? How deeply did her awareness cut into the reality I had trusted? Each day I lived in this house, surrounded by familiar walls, I felt more like a stranger in my own life. One afternoon, I found myself following him again, careful to remain unseen, my pulse hammering like a drum in my ears. He moved through streets I thought I knew, but his destination was always concealed, always unexpected. Kayla's words echoed relentlessly in my mind. He told me he couldn't tell you this. The clarity struck me like lightning. I was not the center of his world as I had believed. The hidden routines, the secret moments, the private confessions, it all existed beyond my reach. Each step I took, each shadow I followed, made the walls of our marriage feel fragile, as if they could crumble under the weight of unspoken truths. I realized with a chilling certainty that the life I thought I shared with him was only a carefully curated fragment, and the rest, hidden and intimate, was more complicated and dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The morning after my shadowed pursuit, I woke to a house that felt smaller, tighter, as if walls themselves were pressing secrets against me. Kayla's words and her knowing gaze clung to my thoughts like persistent shadows, and my husband moved through the kitchen unaware, or so I hoped, of the storm building behind my eyes. I noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers hesitated on the coffee pot, the faint flicker of guilt, or was it caution? In his eyes, when I entered the room, every ordinary detail became a potential clue, a trap I had yet to decode. Fear and fury twisted together in my chest. I longed to confront him, to demand the truth, yet a part of me quaked, knowing the truth might unravel everything I had built around us. I felt like a stranger in my own home, observing a man I thought I knew, realizing more and more that I didn't. As days passed, I began noticing the smallest details, how his eyes lingered on messages before quickly shifting, the subtle scent of perfume or cologne I couldn't place, the way he cleared his throat at odd moments. Kayla's presence loomed larger in my mind, her casual remarks cutting deeper than I ever imagined. "He told me not to tell you," she said one afternoon, with an unsettling calm that made my heart hammer. The realization hit me like ice. This child knew parts of him I had never been allowed to see, and perhaps never would. Each small observation twisted my understanding of him. Each silence, each evasive glance, became proof of the life he was leading in secret. I began to fear that my home, the life I had built with him, was nothing more than a carefully crafted illusion, fragile and ready to shatter with a single revelation. I started leaving subtle tests, tiny breadcrumbs to see if he would falter or reveal something unintended. Each day became a careful dance of observation and concealment, my heart always pounding, my nerves frayed. And Kayla, she grew bolder, offering remarks that seemed casual, but carried a weight that made my skin crawl. "He told me not to say this to you," she said one afternoon, shrugging as if it were nothing. Her innocence was a mask for knowledge that cut deeper than any lie I could have imagined. How had she seen so much? How long had she been observing, knowing, perhaps even guiding? The realization that this child understood him better than I did, that she had access to truths I couldn't touch, terrified me. My marriage, my home, my life, they were unraveling, thread by hidden thread, in ways I wasn't prepared to face. My nights became restless, haunted by the shadows of secrets I was only beginning to perceive. I began documenting everything in a notebook: times he left the house, the tones in his voice, messages he received, fleeting expressions that seemed loaded with meaning. The act of writing was both relief and torment. Each entry brought me closer to the truth, yet pushed me further into despair. Kayla's words and her knowing eyes played like a loop in my mind, each repetition tightening the knot of dread in my chest. The house, once a haven, now felt like a cage, every creak and whisper a reminder that I was surrounded by hidden lives, invisible threads weaving a story I wasn't supposed to see. My husband's careful double life was no longer a distant suspicion. It was unfolding, tangible and devastating, right under my nose. One evening, desperation overpowered caution. I followed him again, moving quietly in the shadows, each step measured, heart hammering in my chest. He walked the familiar streets, but his destination remained a mystery. Kayla's words echoed relentlessly. He told me he couldn't tell you this. The weight of her insight struck me like a lightning bolt. I was no longer the center of his world. The private moments, the hidden confessions, the secret laughter, it all existed beyond my reach, in a life carefully curated without me. My hands trembled, breath shallow, and a chilling certainty settled over me. The man I had married was only partly mine. The rest of him, intimate, secret, devastating, belonged to a world I could neither enter nor understand. And yet, I was forced to witness it unfold before my eyes. The next morning, the house felt alien, every familiar corner suddenly heavy with suspicion. His casual movements, the way he poured coffee or hummed a tune, now seemed rehearsed, calculated, like a man walking through two lives at once. Kayla's words echoed in my mind, small, innocent, yet cutting deep. He told me not to tell you. My chest tightened with a mix of anger, fear, and disbelief. I found myself scrutinizing every glance, every smile, every word, searching for cracks in the facade. Each subtle twitch of his lips or hesitation in his tone became a clue, a breadcrumb to a hidden life I had no right to fully uncover. I felt like a stranger in my own home, watching a man I thought I knew exist simultaneously in two worlds, one of them inaccessible and devastatingly real. I began noticing the smallest inconsistencies, words he used only with Kayla, laughter that sounded different in tone, glances that lingered too long. Each observation gnawed at my sanity, forcing me to replay every memory with suspicion. Was our love ever real, or had it been carefully curated to keep me blind? Kayla's quiet presence loomed over every thought, her knowing gaze a constant reminder that the truth was closer than I dared imagine. Fear twisted twisted in my chest, but curiosity burned brighter. I needed to know, needed to understand what life he had hidden from me, and why a child seemed to hold more knowledge of him than I ever could. Every heartbeat carried both dread and the irresistible pull of revelation. That evening, I watched him from the kitchen window, pretending to be engrossed in dishes while my mind raced. He moved with a familiarity and ease that no longer felt comforting. It felt like a performance. Kayla appeared at the edge of the yard, smiling subtly, a silent participant in the life I was barred from entering. My stomach twisted as I realized that the bond between them was intimate, effortless, terrifying. Each laugh they shared, each casual glance, was a reminder of my exclusion, a cruel proof that the man I thought I knew had built a separate, hidden world. My chest ached, my hands trembled, but I couldn't look away. I needed to see it, even if it broke me. Later that night, the house felt too quiet, so quiet that even my heartbeat sounded like an accusation. I sat on the edge of the couch, replaying every strange moment from the past months, stitching together clues I had once ignored. Then I heard it, a soft chime from his phone on the table. He was in the shower. My breath caught. The screen lit up with a name that made my blood run cold. Kayla's mom. Not her real name, a nickname, a familiarity. My hands trembled as another message popped up. She asked about you again. What should I tell her? My vision blurred, my lungs tightened, and for a moment, I felt like the world tilted beneath me. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't innocent. This was a conversation that had been happening behind my back for far too long. And suddenly, I wasn't just suspicious. I was terrified of the truth waiting to come out. I didn't even realize I was shaking until the phone nearly slipped from my hands. My heartbeat thudded so loudly I could feel it in my throat, in my fingertips, in the hollow center of my chest, where trust used to live. I stared at the screen, waiting, hoping for another message that might explain everything away. Something that would make this feel less like betrayal and more like a misunderstanding. But the silence that followed was merciless. The next notification made me jump. Another message appeared. Don't forget tomorrow. She'll be expecting you. My mouth went dry. Expecting him. A child expecting my husband for what? The shower still ran upstairs, water pounding against tile, but I felt like I was the one drowning. My mind raced through possibilities, each darker than the last. Maybe he was mentoring her, helping her, being kind. But then why hide it? Why erase his messages? Why the secrecy, the tenderness, the heart emoji next to her mother's name? And worst of all, what had Kayla meant when she said, so innocently, "He tells me stories all the time." My fingers hovered over the phone. One tap, and the entire conversation thread would open. One decision, and the truth would spill out, unstoppable. But before I could press anything, I heard the shower turn off. My heartbeat spiked in terror. I placed the phone exactly where it had been, screen down, pretending nothing had shifted, when in reality, everything had. As his footsteps approached, slow and casual, I felt the weight of a secret I wasn't meant to discover settle into my bones. And for the first time, I understood. I wasn't just uncovering lies. I was stepping into a story he never wanted me to read. He walked downstairs with a towel around his shoulders, humming softly as if nothing in the world was wrong. I forced myself to stay calm, pretending my heart wasn't racing. He picked up his phone without suspicion, glanced at it briefly, and slipped it into his pocket. I watched him closely, waiting for any sign: guilt, fear, hesitation. But he moved with practiced ease, like someone used to hiding things in plain sight. He smiled at me, asked if I wanted tea, spoke in that familiar, gentle tone. But now, every word felt rehearsed. Every look felt borrowed. I answered quietly, observing him the way he had unknowingly trained me to. Nothing about his behavior suggested he had a secret meeting planned for tomorrow, or that someone else's child was expecting him. And that was the part that scared me most. How effortlessly he blended lies with everyday life. The next morning, I woke before dawn, my nerves already buzzing like electricity under my skin. He moved through the house quietly, gathering his keys, humming the same tune he always did when he thought no one was listening. I pretended to sleep, breathing slow and steady, but my mind was wide awake, tracking every sound. When the front door clicked shut, I waited only a moment before rising. His footsteps faded down the street, unhurried, confident, too confident. I slipped on my coat and followed at a distance, staying far enough to not be seen. The quiet morning air felt heavy, almost warning me to turn back, but I couldn't, not now. His path was deliberate, familiar. He didn't check behind him once. That alone told me this wasn't the first time he'd taken this route. And when he turned onto that same block, the block where the house stood, I felt my heart curl in on itself. He was going back. I slowed my steps as he approached the house, the sky still brushed with early morning gray. He didn't hesitate, not even a pause to glance around. He walked straight to the door as if it belonged to him, as if she belonged to him. My breath trembled in my chest as I hid behind the hedge across the street, my fingers gripping the branches until they snapped. The door opened before he even knocked. She stood there, hair messy from sleep, wrapped in a robe that hung loosely around her frame. And she smiled the kind of soft, familiar smile I hadn't seen from him in years. He stepped inside without a word, like a man returning home. The door closed gently behind them, as if protecting a life built in silence. My throat tightened. The stillness around me felt cruel, almost mocking, and in that moment, watching that door swallow him whole, I realized something chilling. This wasn't a mistake, this was a routine. I stayed hidden, frozen in a silence so deep it felt alive. Minutes crawled by, stretching into something unbearable. A soft glow flickered inside the house, shadows moving behind the thin curtains, shadows shaped like comfort, like routine, like a man who knew exactly where everything belonged. My stomach twisted. I leaned closer, the cold hedge scratching my cheek as I tried to steady my breathing. Then I saw her silhouette cross the window, holding something small, a child's bowl. My pulse stumbled. Another shadow joined hers, his. They moved with an ease that cracked something open inside me. He touched her back gently, guiding her toward the kitchen with a familiarity he had never offered me. I could almost hear their quiet laughter, the kind shared between people who wake up beside each other, who raise something together, who live a life built on stolen moments. I pressed a hand over my mouth to stop the sob rising in my throat. This wasn't just betrayal, this was a family. I don't know what pushed me forward: desperation, rage, or the dizzying fear that my entire life had already slipped through my fingers. But my feet moved before my mind caught up. I crept along the side of the house, each step sinking into the damp soil. A thin crack in the curtains revealed more than I was ready to see. She stood at the stove, stirring something warm, and beside her, a little boy. No older than 4, my breath shattered. He had my husband's eyes, those unmistakable deep-set eyes that always softened when he laughed. I stumbled back, choking on air. The child tugged on my husband's pant leg, and he bent down, scooping him up with a tenderness I had begged for, yearned for, but rarely received. The boy giggled, tapping a hand against his cheek, my husband's cheek, and my heart caved in. All the distance, all the coldness, all the excuses suddenly made sense. He hadn't grown tired of me. He had been giving every warm part of himself to them. I clung to the wall, nails digging into the paint, as if it could anchor me in a world that had spun completely out of control. The boy's laughter drifted through the cracked window light, innocent, belonging to a life that had been built in the shadows, while I slept beside the stranger who created it. I watched my husband kiss the top of the child's head, a gesture so familiar it stung. He used to do that to me, back when I believed his love was steady and real. My throat tightened as the woman, Kayla's mother, leaned into him, her hand brushing his arm with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. I felt my heart tearing in 2 places, one part for the betrayal, another for the cruel simplicity of it. They weren't hiding from each other. They were hiding from me. I backed away slowly, unsure whether the shaking in my body was from rage or heartbreak, maybe both. Because in that moment, I realized the truth wasn't just painful, it was humiliating. And it had been living right next door. I walked home like a woman split in half, every step trembling under the weight of what I had seen. The night air felt colder than usual, biting at my skin, as if trying to keep me awake, refusing to let me collapse into denial again. I couldn't unsee the way he held that child, the way Kayla's mother leaned into him like he belonged to her, because maybe he did. Maybe he'd belonged to her long before I ever suspected a thing. When I reached my porch, my legs nearly buckled. I pressed my hand to the doorframe, breathing through the storm ripping inside my chest. If they were a family, then what was I? A placeholder, a shield, a story he told to keep 2 worlds from colliding. My mind raced with questions that tasted like poison. I stood there for a long time, staring into the quiet, wondering how someone could build 2 lives so close together, close enough for their secrets to spill into my own home through a child's innocent words. And the worst part, I wasn't done discovering the truth, not even close. The next day, I couldn't focus on anything. Every task, every conversation felt meaningless compared to the storm raging inside me. I watched him from across the room, noting every gesture, every tone of voice, every glance that might betray him again. But he was careful, smiling, polite, utterly unaware of the storm I carried. Meanwhile, my mind kept replaying the scene from the neighbor's house, the child's laughter, the gentle way he had held that boy, the quiet intimacy between him and Kayla's mother. My hands shook as I held a cup of coffee, realizing that all my assumptions about love, marriage, and trust had been wrong. He had been living a life beneath the surface, a parallel existence where his warmth and care were not mine, but theirs. And the cruelest truth hit me. I was part of that secret now, whether I liked it or not. That evening, I found myself standing at the window again, staring across the street with a mix of dread and fascination. The house seemed ordinary from the outside, but I knew better now. Inside, laughter echoed in my mind, replaying moments I had witnessed, the small hands, the shared smiles, the warmth I had longed for. My husband's secrets had grown roots right beneath my eyes, and the weight of knowing threatened to crush me. I clenched the windowsill until my knuckles ached, wondering how many mornings, afternoons, and nights I had spent oblivious, blind to the love he gave elsewhere. Each memory of our years together now felt tainted, fractured by what I had learned. My heart ached not only for the betrayal, but for the innocence I had lost, the naive faith that had once allowed me to believe in us as we were. And in that quiet, I realized I needed answers, no matter how painful they would be. I spent the night restless, my thoughts a relentless storm of questions and what-ifs. Sleep felt impossible. The bed, once a place of comfort, now seemed a cage of uncertainty. I recalled every shared smile, every whispered word, every tender gesture from him that I had treasured. Were they all genuine, or had they been borrowed from a life I wasn't meant to enter? I felt a knot in my chest tighten with every passing hour. Dawn came slowly, gray and unfeeling, as if the world itself understood nothing of my torment. I resolved that I could no longer remain a passive observer. I needed to know the extent of his deception, to confront not just him, but the reality he had built in the shadows. My hands trembled, but determination replaced fear. I would face the truth, whatever it cost me. The following day, I tried to act normal, going about my routine, while my mind replayed every secret I had uncovered. I observed him carefully, noting the subtle gestures, the casual glances, the way he spoke with ease, masking a life that wasn't mine. Every interaction, every smile felt rehearsed, calculated, and yet so effortless. I wondered if he even remembered how he had built these two worlds, or if it had become second nature, invisible to him. My heart twisted as I realized how long I had lived in the shadow of his choices, unaware, naive, believing in a reality that no longer existed, and the thought that he could carry on day after day without missing a beat filled me with a mixture of fear, anger, and an aching sorrow that gnawed at my very soul. By midweek, my curiosity had become unbearable. I couldn't help but track his movements, noting the times he left and returned, and the way he slipped out without looking back. I began recording small details in a notebook, times, smells, snippets of conversation I could overhear from the street. Each entry was like a key, unlocking pieces of a puzzle I had long suspected, but never confirmed. I felt both power and helplessness in knowing these truths. I began to understand that he had built an entire world outside our home, carefully separated from the life I shared with him, and yet so close that even a child could bridge the gap. My chest tightened as I realized that uncovering the full extent of it would demand courage I wasn't sure I possessed. That evening, I found myself unable to resist. I followed him again, staying hidden in the shadows as he walked down the familiar street. Each step he took, each turn he made, was etched into my memory from the last time. The house appeared again, ordinary and quiet, but I knew the life inside was anything but. I pressed myself against a tree, heart hammering, listening for any sound beyond the walls. Inside, I could make out faint laughter and the soft, tender voices of a family I had never been part of. My stomach twisted in knots, part of me wanting to run, part of me needing to see. The sight of him smiling at that little boy, holding him with a warmth I had longed for, pierced through the fragile illusion of my marriage, and left me trembling with a mixture of grief, anger, and awe. I stayed hidden until night fell, watching the house from across the street as shadows stretched across the walls. Inside, the family moved with an ease that made my chest ache. The child laughed, a sound so pure it stabbed me in the heart, and my husband bent down, whispering something soft that made the boy giggle harder. The woman moved closer, her hand brushing his shoulder, and I realized that every secret smile, every tender glance I had longed for in my own home, had been given freely here. I felt a cold rage rise in me, mixed with a hollow sorrow that threatened to swallow me whole. My hands shook, and I pressed them to my face, trying to hold back the tears, to hold back the sobs. But even as I did, a part of me knew this was only the beginning of what I needed to uncover. The days that followed were unbearable. Every smile he gave me, every word he spoke, was filtered through the knowledge of what I had seen. I couldn't trust my own senses, couldn't believe in the intimacy we had shared. My mind became a battlefield of doubt and despair, replaying every interaction with him, scrutinizing each gesture, each phrase, each touch, and all the while, Kayla's knowing eyes haunted me, a constant reminder that she held pieces of his life I would never fully grasp. I wondered how long this double existence had been running, how many secrets were sewn into the fabric of my marriage. The truth had become a living thing, growing larger with each passing moment, consuming the trust I had once placed so effortlessly in the man I thought I knew. I knew I had to confront him, yet the thought of doing so paralyzed me. Each time I pictured the conversation in my mind, my chest tightened, my stomach turned. What would he say? Would he deny it, excuse it, or confess it with that same calm charm that had fooled me for years? The questions piled on top of one another, suffocating me. I replayed the scenes at the neighbor's house endlessly, the way he laughed with the boy, the gentle way he touched him, the subtle intimacy with the woman who was not me. It was unbearable, yet I couldn't look away. Something inside me demanded the truth, even if it shattered me completely. And so I waited, counting each passing second, preparing for a confrontation that I both dreaded and desperately needed. Finally, one quiet evening, I found the courage to speak. I asked him to sit with me, my voice trembling but firm. He looked at me with calm, that same serene expression that had always disarmed me, and I felt the walls of my carefully constructed world begin to crack. I spoke carefully at first, then with more urgency, my words tumbling out in a rush of anger, sorrow, and desperation. I demanded to know about the other life he had built, the child, the woman, the laughter that belonged elsewhere. His eyes softened, and for a moment, I feared his words would be a lie, a deflection, anything to keep the peace. But then he spoke, slowly, each word cutting through me like a blade, confirming every fear, every suspicion, every shattered hope I had held. His confession came in pieces, slow and deliberate, like a story he had rehearsed 1,000 times before. He spoke of choices made, of moments he thought he could protect me from, of a love he claimed existed in two forms. Each word landed like a hammer on my chest, my heart splintering under the weight of his truth. I listened, numb and trembling, to details I had never imagined: birthdays, late-night talks, small victories shared with the child, and the woman I had watched from across the street. With each revelation, the life I thought I knew crumbled further. I realized the man beside me was not the man I had believed in. He was someone layered, complex, and utterly divided, and I had been living in the shadow of someone else's carefully crafted story. After the confession, a heavy silence fell between us. I could feel the weight of every unspoken word pressing down, suffocating me. I searched his eyes, looking for remorse, for regret, for a glimmer of the man I thought I knew. But there was only a calm acceptance, as if he had carried this truth longer than I had known. My mind raced with questions. How could he balance two lives? How had he managed the secret so effortlessly? I felt a mix of fury and despair, knowing that the trust I had placed in him had been broken in ways I could never fully repair. And yet, in the midst of this devastation, a part of me hungered to understand, to see how he had justified this hidden life while keeping me in the dark, wondering if I could ever reconcile the man I married with the man he had revealed himself to be. Days turned into restless nights as I grappled with the reality of his double life. Sleep eluded me, replaced by a constant churn of thoughts and questions that refused to quiet. I walked through our home, seeing familiar objects in a new, sinister light, imagining how each moment of affection might have been shared elsewhere, in another life that existed parallel to mine. Kayla's eyes haunted me still, that knowing glance that had first tipped me off to his secrets. I realized that even if I confronted him every day, even if I demanded the truth repeatedly, the wound had already been made. Trust, once fractured, could not be seamlessly restored, and I was left to navigate the painful labyrinth of betrayal that now defined the life we had once shared so blissfully. I decided to distance myself, at least emotionally, to survive the storm inside me. Each interaction with him felt like walking on shattered glass, careful, tentative, afraid that any wrong step might cut too deep. I observed him, searching for cracks in his composure, hints of guilt or lingering affection. But he remained calm, almost unnervingly so. My thoughts kept returning to the child, to Kayla's knowing eyes, and to the life I had glimpsed from across the street. It was a life that existed without me, a world where the man I had loved had given himself freely, without pretense. The realization that I had been a spectator in my own marriage left a bitter taste in my mouth, a sorrow that was as deep as it was unending. And yet, a stubborn part of me refused to let go completely. I started keeping a journal, pouring every observation, every fear, every fleeting memory of him into its pages. Writing became my lifeline, a place to untangle the chaos of emotions that twisted within me. I documented his routines, his odd disappearances, the scents I couldn't identify, the whispers of voices in his phone calls, and Kayla's eerie familiarity with his life. Each entry was a small act of reclaiming my reality, of mapping the fractured pieces of a marriage I thought was whole. Yet, even as I wrote, a gnawing despair remained. How could the man I had loved live two lives without me noticing? And as I traced the contours of this hidden existence on paper, I realized the truth was bigger than I had imagined, and the story of my life had been irrevocably altered. One morning, I noticed a small envelope slipped under our front door. My hands shook as I picked it up, dread and curiosity colliding in my chest. Inside was a photograph, a snapshot of him with the child, smiling warmly, in a setting that was clearly not our home. My breath caught, tears prickling my eyes as the reality sank in. He had cultivated a life beyond my reach, a life that existed parallel to mine, filled with moments I would never share. The image burned itself into my mind, a tangible proof of his betrayal. I felt a surge of anger and a cold, suffocating fear. How many times had he stood where I was, laughing, hugging, loving someone else, while I believed we were alone? The house felt colder, emptier, and I understood, with a chilling clarity, that nothing would ever be the same again. I confronted Kayla that evening, my voice quiet but trembling, asking how she knew so much. She looked at me with a mixture of innocence and wisdom, that unsettling, knowing glimmer in her eyes. "He told me," she said simply, as if it explained everything. Yet it explained nothing. Her words, brief and casual, struck me harder than any confession, confirming the depth of his deception and the quiet complicity of a child who had unknowingly become a guardian of secrets. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if the walls of my life had peeled away to reveal a raw truth I wasn't prepared to face. The juxtaposition of her youth and the knowledge she carried left me reeling, and I realized the full scope of the betrayal reached far beyond the acts themselves. It had been a silent, constant presence, shaping every day I thought I controlled. That night, I sat alone in the dark, the photograph still clutched in my hands, my mind replaying every encounter, every whispered word, every smile that now felt tainted. The weight of knowing pressed down like a physical force, squeezing my chest and stealing my breath. I wondered how I had missed the signs, how I had trusted so blindly. Anger, sorrow, and disbelief collided, leaving me numb and restless. And yet, amidst the chaos of my emotions, a flicker of resolve emerged. I needed to uncover the full truth. No matter how painful, I could not continue living half blind, half trusting. I needed clarity, even if it shattered the remnants of the life I had once held as whole and safe. The journey ahead promised nothing but more secrets, yet I knew there was no turning back now. The following days became a meticulous investigation. I shadowed his movements subtly, noting every departure, every whispered phone conversation, every unexpected encounter. Each observation tightened the grip of anxiety in my chest, but it also fed a grim determination to see the truth fully. I reviewed the journal I had been keeping, cross-referencing dates, times, and locations, connecting invisible threads that led to moments I had never suspected. Every revelation cut deeper than the last, painting a portrait of a life I had never truly shared, of laughter, affection, and intimacy I had only glimpsed from the edges. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that the man I loved had a carefully constructed dual existence, and I was left to reconcile the familiar with the hidden, the cherished with the forbidden. One evening, I overheard a conversation through the thin walls, his voice soft, gentle, the tone I had once reserved for me now directed elsewhere. My heart froze as fragments of sentences drifted into the room. Laughter shared, secrets exchanged, promises made. The child's voice occasionally chimed in, familiar, innocent, yet piercing in its awareness. I sank to the floor, trembling, a mixture of rage and heartbreak consuming me. The realization hit with brutal clarity. Every intimate moment, every tender word I had believed was ours alone, had been mirrored in another life. The home around me, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage filled with echoes of betrayal. I understood then that the truth was no longer something I could ignore. It was a living, breathing reality, demanding confrontation and reckoning. I could no longer bear the charade of normalcy, the pretense that nothing had changed. Each dinner, each casual conversation felt heavy with unspoken truths, and I found myself withdrawing, retreating into silent observation. The man I had married seemed both present and absent, his smiles hollow, his touches measured. At night, I lay awake, replaying moments, searching for signs I had missed, and wondering how long this had been hidden from me. Kayla's knowing presence hovered in my thoughts, a constant reminder of the life that existed beyond my reach. The duality of his existence pressed on me relentlessly, a weight I could neither lift nor ignore. And I realized that my marriage, my home, my very sense of reality had shifted irreversibly into uncertainty. The tension reached its peak one afternoon when I saw him through the window, laughing openly with Kayla in the yard. The sight twisted my insides, anger and grief surging like a storm I could not control. Everything I had believed about our life together felt like a fragile illusion, crumbling under the weight of this undeniable reality. I questioned myself. Had I been blind, naive, or simply too trusting? The betrayal was no longer abstract. It was tangible, vivid, impossible to ignore. I felt torn between confrontation and self-preservation, unsure which path would lead to peace, or if peace was even possible anymore. The house, once filled with warmth and love, now echoed with the shadows of secrets, and I understood that nothing would ever return to the way it was before it was late one evening when I finally confronted him again. My voice trembling but resolute, I demanded the full truth, every detail, every interaction he had hidden. His eyes, once familiar and warm, now reflected a guarded honesty I had never seen. Piece by piece, he revealed the scope of his double life, small gestures of affection, whispered conversations, moments of laughter, and care shared with Kayla and the other woman. Each revelation felt like a blade, cutting through the remaining trust I had left. And yet, amidst the heartbreak, I found a strange, painful clarity. The man I loved existed in layers, some hidden, some shared, and I could no longer pretend ignorance. The foundation of my marriage had shifted, and I faced the raw, unvarnished truth of the man beside me. The days that followed were a strange mixture of distance and proximity. He was physically present, yet emotionally elsewhere, and I found myself observing every gesture, every glance, trying to decipher intent and truth. Kayla's innocence haunted my thoughts, the way she seemed to understand him better than I ever had. I questioned my own judgment, my ability to read the man I had married. Each interaction felt like navigating a minefield. One wrong step could ignite a confrontation I wasn't sure I could endure. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a theater of tension, where every smile and laugh was shadowed by the weight of secrets. I realized I was living among ghosts of my own creation, unsure which version of my husband was real and which had been carefully constructed to hide a hidden life. I started keeping a careful distance, both for my sanity and to observe him without revealing my growing fear. Each day was a lesson in patience, watching how he moved, how he spoke, how he laughed when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The tension in our home thickened, like a storm gathering unseen, ready to break at any moment. Kayla's presence loomed in my mind, her insights a constant reminder that the world I thought I knew was incomplete. I realized that understanding him fully was impossible without facing uncomfortable truths I had avoided for years. The realization weighed heavily. My marriage had become a fragile dance between honesty and deception, and I was learning the steps too late. One evening, the tension became almost unbearable. I watched him in the living room, reading, sipping his drink, seemingly ordinary, but my mind raced. Every small movement, every subtle glance toward the window where I knew Kayla sometimes played, carried hidden meaning. I felt trapped between wanting to confront him and fearing the answers I might receive. My heart ached with the weight of accumulated suspicion, and yet curiosity clawed at me, demanding understanding. The duality of his existence, once abstract, had become a living, breathing reality. I realized I was no longer merely a wife. I had become a silent observer of a life I had once thought was shared, now fragmented and hauntingly Sleep eluded me that night, the dark hours stretching endlessly as memories and suspicions collided in my mind. I replayed every conversation, every laugh, every touch, searching for clues I might have missed. Kayla's words echoed, innocent yet pointed, revealing what I had never known. I felt a mixture of anger, sorrow, and betrayal, a storm I could neither calm nor escape. My home felt like a stage where I was both actor and audience, trapped in scenes I had not written. The man I had married existed simultaneously beside me and elsewhere, and I understood that the life I had built, the love I had invested, had been quietly observed, quietly judged, and quietly hidden from my understanding. The following days were marked by careful observation and silent questioning. Every time he spoke, I listened for the hidden meaning. Every glance measured against memories I now doubted. Kayla's presence loomed over my thoughts like a quiet specter, her innocence a mask for knowledge I could not fathom. I wondered how long this had been unfolding, how many secrets had been whispered in a world I had never been allowed to see. The trust that had once been the foundation of our marriage now felt fragile, splintering under the weight of concealed truths. I realized that living with him meant navigating a labyrinth of half-truths and whispered histories, where every step could awaken the shadows I had been avoiding. I tried to confront the dissonance within myself, to understand how love and betrayal could coexist so intimately. Each smile from him now felt like a question, each touch a test. Kayla's awareness of him, the quiet certainty in her voice and eyes, haunted me relentlessly. I questioned my own instincts, wondering if I had been blind or simply unwilling to see. The house that once offered comfort now felt like a web, each corner holding echoes of secrets I had never been invited to uncover. Anxiety and grief coiled tightly in my chest, and I realized that the life I thought I controlled was slipping through my fingers, leaving me to navigate a reality I could scarcely recognize. One evening, exhaustion and despair collided, and I found myself sitting alone in the living room, staring at the walls that had witnessed our life. Every memory now carried a shadow, every laughter echoing with hidden meanings. I thought of Kayla, her small face and piercing awareness, and the role she unknowingly played in unraveling my certainty. Questions spiraled endlessly. How much had he shared with her? How much had she observed? And how long had I been living in ignorance? The truth of his divided life pressed down, heavy and relentless. And I realized that no amount of denial could protect me from the reality I had been forced to see. I began to understand the depth of my isolation, the loneliness of knowing someone so intimately, yet discovering entire worlds hidden beneath the surface. Every conversation, every shared moment now carried the weight of uncertainty. Kayla's innocent familiarity with him became a mirror reflecting my own blind spots, revealing how little I had truly known the man I married. Anxiety and sorrow intertwined, leaving me restless at night, haunted by glimpses of a life I wasn't part of. The home that once symbolized safety now felt like a fragile facade, ready to crumble with the slightest disturbance. And I realized that the man I loved existed both within and beyond my reach. In ways I could never reconcile, the days blurred together, each one a delicate balance of endurance and dread. I watched him, studied his gestures, searching for cracks in the carefully maintained facade. Kayla's presence lingered in every thought, a reminder of the unseen life that thrived beyond my understanding. I questioned myself constantly. Had I missed signs, ignored warnings, or been too trusting? The reality of his double existence gnawed at me, a slow, relentless ache that no distraction could soothe. I felt trapped between the desire to confront and the fear of shattering everything, knowing that the next revelation could either bring closure or leave me lost in a labyrinth of betrayal I might never escape. At last, I faced the final confrontation, a quiet moment that held the weight of months of fear and uncertainty. I spoke softly but firmly, laying bare all the suspicions, all the truths I had pieced together, and watched him respond, not with defensiveness, but with an acceptance that chilled me. The child's knowledge, the secret life, the years of hidden laughter and whispered stories, all of it now lay exposed between us. I felt a sorrow deeper than anger, a grief for the life I thought I had, and yet also a strange relief in finally seeing the whole picture. Thank you, my dears, for living this story with me. If you felt every heartbeat, every fear, please subscribe to share the journey of truths revealed and secrets unearthed.